to share your story, we encourage you to go to environmentalleague.org this week, where you'll find a Parks Storytelling campaign page where you can submit your own content, and you can also tweet at hashtag #MyMAPark. So we hope to have your content, because it's valuable to have content from as many legislative districts as possible. And then we'll be getting stories out in the next few months to share those stories. So regarding Thursday's event, a little bit of background. We have a core group of members of the Green Budget Coalition that's been working with the Environmental League for the past number of months to plan the Parks and Water Lobby Day. The Lobby Day will focus on 3 top funding priorities: DCR State Parks and Recreation, DCR Watershed Management, and DEP Administration. Don't worry at this point if you don't know what those things are, because we'll be providing you with talking points about all of these items. And we're really looking for you to focus on telling your own story about why funding for water and our parks matters to you from your local perspective. We're coming to legislators earlier this year, earlier than usual, because it's important for us to make sure that we reach them with our priorities collectively before they start forming their list of top priorities, so we can influence their request to the Ways and Means Committee. We're being proactive by presenting our recommendations before the governor's budget is finalized and released, which will be in the next few months. Currently, just half a penny of every state operating dollar goes toward environmental agencies. The Green Budget Coalition has had a long-standing goal of 1% of the state operating budget for the environment, a level that was last seen about 10 years ago. Staffing is down about 30% at both the Department of Environmental Protection, DEP, and the Department of Conservation and Recreation, DCR, which manages the state park system, over the past few years, and this is due to substantial funding reductions. Our funding recommendations represent a small step in the right direction toward refunding. Now, it's important that legislators and the Baker administration hear from constituents that funding for parks and water are important and should be prioritized. They're used to hearing about so many different issues, but they do not tend to hear about environmental issues enough from enough people enough of the time for it to be a high priority. And that's something that we need to change. So we're excited for you to be part of the Parks and Water Lobby Day, and I'm going to turn things over to Liz to get into some more details.
Thanks so much, Erica.
And Liz, before you start, I'm sorry, this is Heather again. I just wanted to let everyone know, to confirm, I am recording this session so that anybody who misses it can view it independently on their own later. So just wanted to let everyone know we're recording.
Great. So my name is Liz Murphy, as Heather mentioned, and I am the Legislative Director for the Massachusetts Organization of State Engineers and Scientists. We do represent all of the scientists and engineers at DEP and DCR, and we are thrilled to be partnering with ELM and other members of the Green Budget Coalition on the Parks and Water Lobby Day. And thank you all so much for taking time out of your workday today to join us for this little advocacy training prep for Thursday. So I'm going to talk about 3 things with you. First, I'm going to do kind of a basics overview, state players, state processes, kind of some background information. This may be a Civics 101 review for some of you, but just so that everyone's coming to the table on Thursday with kind of some of the same basic information about the state government. Second, we're going to talk about advocacy in action, what it really means to build a policymaker and an office into a champion for parks and water. And then third, we're going to go over specifics for the meeting itself, kind of what you want to do in advance, what to remember during the meeting, and what to do after your meeting. So let's dive right in. So this quote is one of my favorites when it comes to advocacy, and it's, "If you're not at the table, you're on the menu." It comes from U.S. Senator Michael Enzi. And the idea behind it is that decisions, particularly with regard to spending in government, are made every single day. And people that are at the table have a better chance at having their priorities funded than people that are not at the table and are therefore on the menu. One of the ways to get yourself at the table is to speak up and have your voice heard, particularly as part of a coalition. It's one of the most effective ways to get policymakers' attention It doesn't always mean you're going to get the outcome that you want, but by participating in the process, you are much less likely to be served as the main course. So thank you in advance for coming to have a seat at the table on Thursday. So let's dive into that quick review of the basics. First off, key players to know at the state administration level. That would be our governor, Charlie Baker, and Matthew Beaton, who is the Secretary of the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, and that covers both DEP and DCR, which, as Erica mentioned, those are the agencies that we'll be making our funding asks about. Next, we have key players in the state legislature. As a quick review, there are 160 state representatives in the House, and there are 40 state senators. Most people will have a rep and a senator, but some people, because of elections or vacancies, may only have one, and that's perfectly okay. So in terms of key players, we're going to be focusing on the committees that provide funding. And in that case, it's the Ways and Means Committee. There's the House Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Ways and Means Committee. And then together, they form the Joint Ways and Means Committee. So on the House side, you have Chairman Jeffrey Sanchez and you have Vice Chair Stephen Kulik. There are 36 members in total on the House Ways and Means Committee. And if you want to go and look them up, you can go to malegislature.gov and you can double check and see if anyone you're meeting with is on the committee. Key players also are the Senate Ways and Means Committee, as I mentioned. You have the chairwoman there is Senator Karen Spilka, and the vice chairman is Senator Sal DiDomenico. There are 18 members in total on the Senate Ways and Means Committee. Again, you can check those at malegislature.gov to see if any of the members you're meeting with sit on this committee. And as I mentioned, for our purposes, this is kind of the key committee because they're the ones that have the first bite at the apple when it comes to the budget, which we're going to talk about right now. So the budget process. The state budget is based on a fiscal year, and it starts on July 1 and ends on June 30th. So when we're asking, we're going to be making an ask for the fiscal year that starts on July 1st, 2018 and ends on June 30th of 2019. It will be referred to as fiscal year 19 because it ends in 2019. It's a little confusing, but if you can just remember FY19 or fiscal year 19, you're good. As Erica just mentioned, you'll see that this is the timeline for the budget and it starts in January. We're coming in November, and that is very strategic and intentional. The reason is by January, when the governor is releasing his budget, members are kind of already thinking, well, I want to prioritize this, or this is going to be one of the lines I put in my letter to the Ways and Means Committee. We want them thinking about parks and water and those three specific line items early. We want them thinking about it now in the fall. So that's why we're going in this week. But the process, so you know, when it formally starts up, will be in January when the governor will release his budget proposal. Following that, for the next few months, the Joint Ways and Means Committee, so the House Ways and Means Committee plus the Senate Ways and Means Committee, will hold hearings on the governor's budget proposal. Then the House goes first. It will release its budget. The full House will then debate and adopt the budget that was released by the Ways and Means Committee. And then the Senate will go second, and they'll do the same thing. The Senate Ways and Means Committee will release their version of a budget. The full Senate will debate it and pass it. And then we have likely two different budgets, one coming out of the Senate and one coming out of the House. The next step is called conference committee. You take 3 members from the House and 3 members from the Senate, and they work together to hash out all the differences between the House and Senate versions. Finally, by June 30th, which is the end of this fiscal year, they need to have agreed upon a final budget that they both pass. That is then sent to the governor to be reviewed. He can either approve the entire budget, he can veto the entire budget, or he can go line by line and say yes to some things and no to others, which is often what happens. If he says no to certain things and vetoes them, the legislature can then override any of those with a 2/3 roll call vote in both chambers. So some key dates to keep in mind or that may come up in your meetings. January 24th is the deadline for the governor to release his FY19 budget. So as I mentioned, we're a few months ahead of the kickoff for this process, so that's great. May 9th is when the House Ways and Means Committee must release their FY19 budget. June 30th, as I mentioned, is the last day of the FY18 budget, the one that we're currently in. And then July 31st is actually the last day of formal session for the legislature in 2018. And that's because it is an even year, which means it's an election year. So moving on to advocacy in action and what we're really trying to accomplish now that we, we're taking the time and we're going to participate and we have kind of the background knowledge level set. So the goal of advocacy is to create champions, and all champion building is just building relationships and getting to know people, whether that's staff or policymakers. It's a continued process. You can kind of think about coming to the lobby day as a first step in the process for many people. Maybe it's a continued step for others who have already been meeting with their representatives or senators over the years. But this is just part of building a relationship. Just like any relationship, it takes time and effort. It doesn't happen overnight. You don't get a definitive decision from one meeting, but that's okay. Know that this is a process and you're taking a really important step on Thursday by coming to the lobby day. So there are many ways that you can go about building a champion. You can see that I've highlighted number 3, which is having a meeting, which is what you're all going to be doing. But you can also send emails or letters. You can make calls, seeking policymakers out in the community, whether it's at a scheduled event or just bumping into them in the grocery store, inviting them to events that you're holding for your organization, asking them to, speaking yourself at a hearing on a bill, or even giving them an award and recognizing for the work that they are doing on the environment already. These are all different ways to go about building a champion and building that relationship. So when you actually are talking to a policymaker or to a staffer, and you really want to get them to understand why your issue, these issues are so important when they have so many issues in front of them, I think it's helpful to think about this kind of recipe for success of 3 things you want to communicate, in addition to who you are and why you care about this issue, which kind of ties into number 2. You also want to share a statistic. You want to start with some sort of a statistic. This, if you don't have one off the top of your head, is perfectly fine. We will be giving you a ton of materials. Feel free to pick 1 or 2 of your favorites and go with that. The most important piece is the second piece, which is your story. Why do you care about parks and water? What influence have they had on your life? If you can make this local, that is wonderful. I think the more local that you can tie your stories and make them personal, the better, because that's what people connect with. Finally, an ask. Whenever you're talking to a policymaker or a staffer, having an ask is really important. In this case, we're going to be giving you the ask, which is, will they include, we'll go on to this in a moment, but will they include as a priority one of these 3 lines in their funding letter? So moving on to the specifics of our meeting itself, kind of some tips and tricks and how you want to maybe go about this on Thursday. So as I just mentioned, we want to have a specific ask. And our ask is, will you include increased funding for 1 or more of the following budget lines in your personal letter to the Ways and Means Committee for FY19? And these are the 3 lines that Erica mentioned. Again, you're going to be getting a ton more information on this. You'll have talking points that you can hand and just point to, so don't worry about memorizing any of these. But these are the 3 that we're going to be asking about. This ask is important because it is specific. Many of you may have heard of the new trend towards SMART goals. You want them to be specific and measurable. This is one of those kinds of things. You want your ask to be specific. In general, I think it's easy for many policymakers and staffers when they are presented with so many wonderful competing ideas and information and lines and things to fund, they can easily say, if the ask that they get from a constituent is, do you support the environment? It is so easy to say, of course I support the environment. I love the environment. Environmental things are great. It leaves both people feeling great. The constituent's glad to hear that they support the environment, and the policymaker is glad because they do support the environment, but they also weren't asked to make a very specific action based on that meeting. So this is why this is so important, is to ask them, will you actually include this as a top priority to the committee, one of these 3 things or more of them? So meeting preparation before your meeting. Many of you will have meetings scheduled in advance, either by yourself or by a leader on your team. If you don't, that's also fine. Don't be shy at all. Feel free to walk right into an office, tell them who you are, tell them where you're from, and ask if the member or a staffer has a few minutes to sit down and chat with you. That's perfectly fine as well. The second thing, though, is to research your policymakers a bit ahead of time. In addition to figuring out what committees they sit on, especially the Ways and Means Committee, figure out what towns they represent, what their constituency generally looks like, and then look for personal connections. Again, this is all about relationship building. So if you went to the same high school, do you go to the same religious group, do you volunteer at the same charity? Kind of having a sense of that in advance gives you a really easy way to start the conversation off and just connect with them. Go over the lobby day materials that we send you. Again, no one is expected to be an expert. This is just background material, so you feel like you're armed with some information that you can point to or you can drop off for the member. Just kind of flip through it and familiarize yourself with it. Prepare your story. This is probably the most important part. Think about why you are taking time out of your day to come and advocate for parks and water and how you want to communicate that to the member and or staffer. Also, for many of these meetings, it's important to know that you're going to have other people probably in the meeting with you. So instead of each person going through and kind of going through that recipe for success with a story and a statistic and making the ask, coordinate in advance, kind of who's going to be in charge of statistics, who's going to be in charge of stories, designate someone who's going to introduce the group and kind of facilitate, make sure someone else is really the note taker, and also have someone who's in charge of follow-up. And then finally, someone who's in charge of taking and posting a picture. Very important. It's great to give policymakers and staffers credit for doing the meeting. Make sure you know what their handle is or their Facebook name is so that you can tag them in it. So in the meeting itself, introduce yourself. Let the policymaker and staffer know who you are, what you're affiliated with. Make that personal connection. Be concise. Ask if you feel comfortable how much time the staffer or member has, but you should always aim for about 30 minutes total as a group. So make your points as clearly and succinctly as possible. Make sure that you also give time for the policymaker and staffer to respond and ask questions. It should feel less like a presentation and more like a casual chat with someone. Make note of any questions. And this is one thing that I always tell people. It can feel really nerve-wracking if a policymaker asks you a question and you don't know the answer to it. That's actually a great opportunity. Follow-up is a key part of this relationship. So if you don't know the answer, say, great, I'm happy to get back to you on that. Let me make a note of it. It just gives you a really good excuse for following up in a few weeks with them. Make sure you always make your ask. Don't leave without making it. But also don't be discouraged if you don't get an answer on the spot. As I said, this is a really specific ask that we're making of policymakers. Most of them will not be prepared to answer it then and there. They'll probably say, oh, let me look at this, at the materials you're giving me. I need to think about this a bit. Again, totally fine. Just say, okay, sounds good. I'll be following up with you. And then take your picture. Make sure that you have something that you can share on social media. After the meeting, double check as a group, kind of huddle as a group, make sure that you have contact information for everyone who attended. That way you can, whoever is in charge of emailing the policymaker can CC everyone on that email. But if everyone wants to send their own individual thank yous, that's perfectly fine as well. Take a few minutes to debrief. You'll be surprised at how people hear different things in the space of a meeting, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, but kind of take a minute to see what everyone else heard and see where you think the policymaker or staffer is on your ask. Very, very important is to submit your meeting report. We will be passing these out earlier in the day. You can bring your reports to the 4th floor in the 411 wing, and we'll be going over this again on Thursday, but please, please, please do not leave without submitting your meeting report to us. Within a few days, send a thank you email. Let them know that you appreciate them taking the time. Definitely copy other meeting participants if you can, and make sure that you reiterate your ask so they know that you're holding them accountable in that email. And after a few weeks, if you haven't heard back, feel free to follow up. If you feel like they're still waiting on the ask and it's not, you don't feel comfortable saying again, where are you on this? Sometimes sending along an article or just checking in on something else is a softer way to say, hey, I was thinking about this. I thought you might be interested in it. You know, by the way, have you had any more time to think about what we discussed a few weeks ago? So again, it's just about keeping in touch and keeping that rapport up. So that is about it. My final 2 points, which I hope I have hammered home, are that this is all about relationship building. You're taking a great first step by coming on Thursday, and follow up, follow up, follow up. Thanks so much. I really appreciate you all taking the time.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you. And I apologize. I'm getting. I apologize. I'm getting. Not everybody has uploads too. At this point, Erica has a few items to share that I can put into the chat line as well. But does anybody have questions?
Heather, while we wait for the questions, I'll add a couple of things. This is Erica Madison at the Environmental League again. You can do what Liz was recommending very easily in terms of looking up some basic information about your legislators. If you go to the legislative website, malegislature.gov, you can go to the House page and you can go to the Senate page. You just go to the name of your legislator, it will bring you to their profile page, and there'll be a tab on there that shows you the map of the district, and you can zoom in to see more detail about where the lines of the district are. It's important to keep in mind that legislators tend to be very focused on their districts, so the more that the conversation can focus on their particular district, the better. That being said, the line items that we'll be advocating for are statewide line items. They support the overall functioning of the agencies. In the case of the DCR State Parks and Recreation, that's focused on staffing and maintenance for the state park system, which includes state forests, parkways, and a number of other responsibilities. And the DEP administration line item is for the overall running of the agency of the Department of Environmental Protection. So everything from clean air and water to climate change to hazardous waste site cleanup to recycling, all of those types of things are included within the Department of Environmental Protection. And as for the DCR watershed management line item, that is focused on water supply and data forecasting needs and drought management task force support across the state. So all three line items are focused on statewide needs, but if you can illustrate these using local examples, that's what will tend to be most compelling to the legislators. In terms of social media, I wanted to share that we'll be using a couple of hashtags for Thursday so that we can make sure the tweets are recognizable and easily identifiable. So we'll be providing this to you later, but just as a heads up, we'll be using hashtag Parks Water Lobby Day, as well as hashtag MAPOLI, M-A-P-O-L-I, which is the Massachusetts political hashtag. And those will just make it so that we can easily locate the tweets that are associated with the lobby day and try to generate some buzz, as you might have seen other organizations do when they host lobby days.
Thanks, Erica. We also have from Joan, Joan, I've just unmuted you in case you want to add more, but she's asking, should we have each member of our team give a statistic and story, then follow with the ask?
I think that's perfectly fine. I don't think that you need to necessarily follow the order. I think that I think as long as you get all three pieces in there, you can mix the ingredients of the recipe any way you want.
Okay, sounds good.
And I would add to that you want to make sure that you have some time for some exchange with the staffer or the legislator so that they have an opportunity to share what's important to them when it comes to water and parks, and kind of try to get them engaged in the conversation so you're not just lecturing at them, but they have a chance to engage. And so, you might ask them some questions that will kind of help to elicit from them what they're hearing or what their own concerns or priorities are when it comes to parks and water in their district. And you want to share your personal stories and then also have the ask in there.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? Wait, there's a question from Cosmo. Dress code. Good question. Advice on the dress code.
We are going to be taking photos, and we are also going to have videographers present. So if you can do something to the effect of a button down and khakis or something of that kind of in that realm, that would be great. You definitely don't need to come in a three-piece suit, but if you would like to, that is welcome. But come in what you feel comfortable in, but we want to make sure that it is professional looking. So I would say to minimize logos and wording on your clothing unless it is identifying you with an organization such as the Appalachian Mountain Club or another group that's relevant.
Yeah, I'll add on to that.
Yeah, please.
I'm not going to add on to that because I've got.
Okay, and then I would just to follow up on the piece about the videographer and the photos. We will have waiver forms for the video work, so we will be asking people to just sign those. What we're looking to do, going back to that state parks storytelling campaign I was mentioning earlier, we are looking to integrate some content from the lobby day into the video that we're having produced, which is about the state funding of environmental agencies, which will be completed in a couple of months. So we'll be looking to conduct short interviews with some constituents from around the state at the lobby day. So if you get asked, if you feel comfortable being on camera, we welcome you to. If you don't wish to, that's fine as well. And then we will be, the material will be getting edited, and then select pieces will be used to help in terms of advocacy down the road.
Hugh has a question also. I'm just going to unmute Hugh, because you have your hand raised.
Hi. Speaking of lobby day, will we have any badges or anything to identify us as related to ELM or presenting something?
Yes, there will be stickers that say Parks and Water Lobby Day. They're not going to be huge, but hopefully they'll be big enough that people will see them. And we'll also be having green folders for everybody that will have the materials in them. We're keeping printouts to a minimum, but there will be a couple pieces of paper for you, and those will all be in green folders. So there'll be people walking all over the State House with green folders, and that will help to show that something's going on.
Thank you.
Any other questions? These are all good. Oh, a question from Peter. Says, will you be making these slides available for us to download? I have recorded, and I am still recording this webinar, so I can make the webinar available to all of you, but this is also a separate question of, can we just send the PowerPoint?
Yes, we will be sending the PowerPoint around to everybody who's registered for the lobby day, either today or tomorrow. We'll probably be sending a few emails between now and the lobby day, so just keep an eye out for what we send. There will also be a training. The same training will actually be conducted on the lobby day on Thursday, so maybe I'll just take a moment to go over the schedule a little bit for Thursday. We're going to start off the day with a breakfast. Just kind of come in and grab some food at Great Hall at the State House Thursday, starting at 10 a.m. We'll have a sign-in table, so we'll ask everybody to sign in there before they get some food. Please enjoy that time from 10 to 10:20 to mingle and visit the informational tables that we'll have set up from a few different organizations. And then we will have a speaking program starting at 10:20 to accommodate some legislators' very busy schedules. And we will be hearing from the chairs of the Environment Committee, as well as the Senate chair of the Parks Caucus, and 3 more legislators who have been terrific leaders on these issues. All this information is on the Lobby Day website at environmentalleague.org. At 11, we will turn things over to Liz Murphy from Moses, who just presented now, who will lead advocacy training again for anybody who couldn't be part of today's webinar. and then we'll have a few minutes for people to kind of get organized and identify others who might be going to their meeting. If you don't connect with them at Great Hall, what we recommend is that you just go to the legislative office a few minutes early where you have a meeting scheduled or where you will be approaching the staff or the legislator, and you can meet outside the office with others from the district and introduce yourselves and get organized and then head inside. And so the meetings will be taking place between about noon and 2:30. As I said, many of the meetings will be with staff, in part because there are some formal sessions taking place on Thursday that will have the legislators occupied, but the staff are extremely important. And if possible, you want to meet with the policy staff as opposed to the constituent services staff, but anybody's fine. And then at the end of the day, we'll have a room where you can come in the State House, and we'll ask that you turn in a quick feedback form so that we know who met with whom and any follow-up that's needed.
Thanks, Erica, and thanks, Liz. Are there other questions? I'm just going to give it a minute in case anyone's typing for it to come through. All right, well, thank you all for joining this session today, and thank you very much for planning to join us on Thursday.
Thank you, everybody. We look forward to seeing you on Thursday.
Thanks very much.
All righty, we'll sign off now. Bye-bye.
Sign off now. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.